Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening from. This is Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, where we will talk about the challenges and triumphs of living with NVLD, that is nonverbal learning disability. And we will not only be talking about the challenges that I have personally, Jennifer Lynn Purcell, but also the challenges that other NVLDers have in their life with having that learning challenge. And I also like to broaden out to other learning challenges like autism and dyslexia and ADHD and Asperger's to try to be more inclusive and to compare and contrast the challenges that we all experience as neurodivergents. And I also try to include neurotypicals in it as well, as terms of saying that they might experience similar challenges, but to different degrees than neurodivergents do, and to try to say, hey, this is how we can help each other with these challenges. I also wanted to let you know that I started a Patreon account for this podcast to try to get some more revenue from it. That's not the reason why I started this podcast, but I'm trying to get some revenue from the podcast because it will help me keep it going. So if you are willing to donate even $1 or $2 or $5, whatever amount is comfortable for you, to Patreon for Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, that would be appreciated. You can also use Spotify to donate money, and you can also use BetterHelp to donate money with clicking on the link and becoming a customer of BetterHelp. So those are 3 different ways you can support the podcast, and I hope that you will choose which way works for you, and that you will choose which level works for you as well. And I hope that you do it because the podcast helps you also, and that you are willing to support me in continuing to produce it. Thank you. Hello, audience of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. So today's episode will be about trying to have more confidence in yourself and not second guess yourself. Have any of you been second guessing yourself for a long time because of self-doubt, low self-esteem, or low confidence? I'm sure we do this whether you are neurodivergent or neurotypical. I still do it myself sometimes, even though I have worked a lot in this area. So for me, usually when it comes up, at least one of the cases is when I am talking with somebody about something that they want to share with me, and that they would think I would believe them in. But what I have found out to be true for myself, and maybe this happens for you, is that sometimes I don't completely believe what the other person is sharing with me until I see it for myself. And I don't think that has to do with the person who is sharing the information. I think it more has to do with my own behavior of second guessing myself a lot. And for me, usually I struggle in that area because I'm still trying to improve and grow in that area. And I feel like I'm not quite done with the improvement and growth that I can do, which means that there's still something I can learn from it, and that God is, or spirit, whatever you want to call it, is trying to teach me that, hey, you need to pay attention to this, Jennifer. You still need to work on your self-esteem and your confidence, and make sure that you do trust yourself, and that you have that, because then it might affect your relationships with others. One of my New Year's resolutions was to have more positive self-talk. I would say that trusting yourself and stopping the negative self-talk has to do with stopping the second guessing that we do, whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical. It's not easy to do this because the first step is to realize what you are doing. I started doing this work by catching myself when I was second guessing myself, having negative self talk, low self esteem, self doubt, or low confidence. And then I would try to turn those moments into learning points and lessons. As I got better at catching myself, I would try to turn my negative thoughts into positive ones. It wasn't always easy for me to do this because I would often beat myself up for the mistakes I make. But I decided to stop doing that and instead ask myself, would I have done it any differently if I had known about the mistake ahead of time? Sometimes the answer was no, other times it was yes. I used that to help myself feel better about the mistake. I also realized that I'm not the only one who makes mistakes. I love listening to songs. One of my favorite is I Learn and I Forget by Daniel Namod. I love this song because I feel like it is the soundtrack to my life. I also like the song Now by Mallory Hope because it's about her not envisioning herself being on the path she is on currently, yet she realizes that God will always be with her no matter where or what path she is on. I realized this was true for myself in college when I didn't believe I could graduate, but my family, friends, and teachers believed I would, especially my mother. She would say to me, "Do you believe that I believe you will graduate?" I would say yes, and eventually I did believe in myself, especially when I would dance in my cap and gown in my apartment. Another time that helped me believe more in myself was when I decided to follow my gut and disclose to my mom about the sexual abuse I was experiencing in my childhood. I did that because I realized that I was the only one that could stop it. I also noticed that when my cousin said we would get in trouble, if any of us told someone that he was wrong, the only one that would get in trouble was him. And I was 100% right. That was the day I stopped second guessing my gut, confidence, self esteem, and self doubt. I decided to begin to question it after that, meaning stop questioning it and be like, well, I think I have a better intuition than I thought I did. And even more so, I realized I was only doing it because I thought I couldn't do something that someone else could do so easily. That often happened when I would compare myself to a neurotypical doing something that is usually challenging for a neurodivergent to do. For example, driving isn't easy for me to do. I didn't learn how to drive until I was 22, but I do enjoy doing it because it gives me independence and allows me to do some fun social things like dating. The aspects that make driving challenging for me are the visual, spatial, multitasking, and need for fast reflexes. I've worked on these in other areas in my life so that driving is easier for me to do. I jump rope and I play jacks to help with my timing, reflexes, and peripheral vision. Something that I also do with my peripheral vision is when I run, I often run on trails where there are rocks that you can easily trip on. And I always try to glance down occasionally when I run, even if I've done that trail numerous times, excuse me, to make sure that I don't trip. Because even though I'm the kind of person that will keep running after I trip, um, I want to make sure that I don't trip and seriously hurt myself because often I'm training for a half marathon and that might not let me do the half marathon. So I try to make sure that I'm in good training shape. Um, Another example is mental math and balancing a budget. Those are easier for neurotypicals to do than neurodivergents usually. I don't like doing these things, but they are essential for me to do and to learn how to do for adulting. I have to Sorry, I do have the best um, coach for this, though, and that would be my mom. If you want to hear more about this topic, you can go to the episodes about taxes, finances, and big picture. Okay, enough about me. Let's do look at some articles from the web. The first article is titled "Change Your Thoughts, Stop Second Guessing" from Integrative Council, written in March of 2021. Quote, "Our thoughts are more powerful than we think. If you constantly have negative thoughts swirling around and you don't catch them, they can start to manifest in unfavorable ways. An issue that clients often run into is that they second guess themselves and don't have a solid foundation to stand on because they don't trust themselves. If you have parents who criticize you, are a perfectionist, have low self esteem, or have chronic pessimistic thinking, it's easier to be doubtful of yourself. Here are 5 tips on how to stop second guessing yourself. Trust yourself, become more aware of your thoughts and feelings, find comfort in making mistakes, fall in love with learning, becoming familiar with the unknown. Let's take a deeper look into each step. This quote from the first step, trusting yourself, a way that you can build your self trust is to zoom out and look at yourself as a whole person. When making decisions, draw on your abilities or your past experiences in order to check in with yourself and make smart choices. You could make a courage journal where you will record all the ways you acted courageously so that you can look back on it and remind yourself how strong you are. Wow. I actually really like the idea of doing a courage journal. I haven't heard of that before. I've heard of gratitude journals. But I think courage journals would be good because then you're looking back on your success and you are more focused on the positive, like you would with a gratitude journal, and realizing, hey, I've done a lot more this year and accomplished a lot more this year than I thought I would or than I did last year. Um, Now, it might not be good to compare each year to itself because each year might have different challenges and circumstances that probably what am I trying to say? Probably attributed to your success, and that should not be the reason. What I'm trying to say is that when you look back on your improvement and how it's been different in each year, do take into account the circumstances and incidents that might have come up and might have challenged you with your goals because that might be determinant of the success. But I would also say that even if that is true, pat yourself on the back for getting through those incidents and challenges because that means you were still willing to go after your goals even with those, right? So the second step um, is becoming more aware of your thoughts and feelings. Awareness is half the solution. Once you are aware of your negative thoughts, you can intervene with a positive thought. Sometimes our minds are resistant to these positive thoughts and they don't want to believe them. That was from the article. I definitely agree with that because um, I can think for myself when I was still getting used to having NLD, and when I say used to, I mean knowing that I had it and knowing about the diagnosis and knowing how to deal with it in college. I remember thinking sometimes, oh, this sounds like a stupid question. I'm not going to ask my professor that. I'm just going to stay quiet. And then I realized when I asked my the TA the question because I had more courage with that than I did the professor, that they were like, "Why didn't you ask that in class?" I was like, "Well, I was a little shy and I thought it was kind of stupid." And you know, they were like, "No, Jennifer, it's not stupid. I can." They could really. would appreciate the nervousness and shyness, but they're like, no, you can ask that if you want to or need to. But I think also for me, because I was homeschooled, I wasn't used to asking questions in class. So I was always emailing my professor or teacher and asking them that way instead of in person, because that's what I was used to. So I don't think I really had not so much the courage, but more the behavior to ask questions in person. Um, on the third step from the article is to find comfort in making mistakes. Quote, this is something that you might have heard so many times that it has lost its meaning, but it is true when they say that everyone makes mistakes. We wouldn't be having this human experience if we didn't make mistakes. And not being able to make a decision because you are afraid of making a mistake keeps you stuck and stagnant. That is very true. I think for myself, I try not to be afraid of the mistakes I'm going to make when I'm trying to make a decision, because I, when I look back at the mistakes I've made, like I've said before in this episode, and I ask myself, would I still have made that decision if I knew about the mistake ahead of time? Usually I say yes, because it's like, if I didn't make the mistake, then I wouldn't have learned more from that decision, whatever it may be. Um, and sometimes the mistake is pretty bad. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's in between bad and good. And um, you have to do more work to get back to where you were before the mistake. But I think that's a good thing, because then you hopefully won't make it again or as often, and you'll learn better for the future. Excuse me. On the fourth step of falling in love with learning, quote, if we knew everything, we would stay at the same level our entire life, which isn't the point of having this human experience. Falling in love with learning will help you with your self doubt, because instead of expecting perfection from yourself, you start to see the beauty of learning new things about yourself. So I agree with that wholeheartedly. Sorry, that was a little bit of a mouthful, because I myself love learning. And I've always had that passion even before I started this podcast. I loved learning in school, and I loved it in college, and I loved it even when I had challenges with my academics, which might surprise you. Um, but for me, I love it because it always teaches you, life always teaches you something new, even if you have graduated from college, you are going to still be learning every day of your life, even if you don't notice it, maybe every week. Um, I know I am. And I try to keep that in mind and realize, hey, this is, like the article said, this is teaching me new things about myself and helping me learn more about myself and be like, well, maybe this will help me with something else in my life. Lastly, the fifth step of becoming familiar with the unknown. Quote, decision making starts to feel impossible because we are so scared that if we make the wrong decision, something bad will happen to us. If we embrace the unknown and approach it with curiosity and the love of learning, not only do we start to embrace life, but we are then able to make decisions from a place of strength rather than fear. Close quote. So I agree with that also, because um, I have had to become comfortable with the unknown, not just with NLD, but with chronic migraines. With both of them, I've learned in the past 9 years of both diagnoses that you kind of just have to tackle the challenges that come at you as neurodivergent with chronic pain. Um, because if you don't try, then you're never going to know if you were able to succeed with that goal or with that new medication that what might help you with your pain or anxiety, whatever you're trying to do that is new and an experience for you in your area. You have to go after it, because if you don't, then you're never going to know if you would have succeeded and would have found something that is going to help you bring more joy and fun into your life. And it's good to act as if it were impossible to fail. I actually got that the other day in a fortune cookie, and I was like, gosh, I got to fit that into an episode somehow. And I think it fits with this one, because if you act as if it was impossible to fail with the majority of your life, then it is endless what you can do. It truly is. So the next article is titled Socializing as an Autistic, the Burden of Second Guessing. Posted on March 9th of 2014 by Autistic Aloha. I need a little bit of water, so just a sec. Quote, it happens like this. One day I ran into someone at a gas station that I hadn't seen for a while. It was nice to see them and I enjoyed seeing them. However, as I drove away, an old familiar thought process kicked in. Did I say the right things? Did I forget to say something? Should I have extended my hand for a friendly handshake? Should I have given a quick hug? Did I look at the person's face enough? Did I look at their face too much? Did my eyes dart around too much and make them uncomfortable? Boy, I sure hope they enjoyed talking with me, and so on. This is the burden that I seem to have to bear during and after nearly every social interaction that I have with people. I feel so out of place, like a fish out of water. Close quote. So that was the last article I wanted to share with you today. And I hope what you can take away from these articles, especially the last one, that neurodivergence, and I definitely have that thought process too. We try to, I think some of us try so hard to socialize because we yearn for it and we want to be good at it, because we realize that we're not always good at it. And we desperately want somebody to like us. And we want that to last. And when it doesn't last, we think, oh no, what did we do wrong? Which may not always be us, it may be the other person. And actually, I did an episode on ghosting last year, I think. So please go to that episode if you have been ghosted. Sorry. I know what that's like. It's happened to me quite a few times. But what I'm trying to say is that this also goes with second guessing. When you've talked to somebody and you look back on it like this individual did who's on the spectrum and comes up with all the questions in her mind or their mind, that is second guessing yourself, because you're like, oh, did I keep eye contact? Did I, like the article said, did I say the right things? Did I forget to say something? How about instead of doing that, try to think of the things you did do. So like maybe they were telling you about how their summer went and you asked, oh, what was your favorite part of your summer? Or did you go on one of those family trips you usually go on? If so, where'd you go? Something like that. Like for me, I have a lot of friends who are older than me, and by older me, I mean more older and adult age. But I like talking to them, and I think I like that because it's sometimes easier to talk to them than people my age. No offense, but that just happens for me sometimes. So what am I trying to bring up with this? Usually what I try to do with them is that I try to think about, okay, what do I know that they've been doing recently? And can I ask them questions about that to see how it went? Like, were they on a trip? Were they training for a bike ride or a half marathon? Or were they training for um, a presentation or something like that? Then I try to use those as talking points. It makes it easier. So, as my wrap up, I hope that you got more confidence out of this episode and realized, hey, even the podcast host, me, Jennifer, has challenges with this. And boy, even though she's been working at this for 9 years and still has challenges, that makes me feel better as an audience member, because then I know I'm not alone. And that's what I try to do with this podcast. In each of these episodes, I try to help you feel not alone, whether you're neurotypical or neurodivergent, because I'm sure you second guess yourself whether you're neurotypical or neurodivergent. And I hope that you will share this with somebody else as well and help them be more confident about themselves and trust themselves better.
And today I am very excited to announce that BetterHelp is now sponsoring this podcast. I have had 7 years of therapy, so I know it can help change your life if you not only let it, but work on the personal goals that you set with your therapist. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist. So you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are the greatest asset. And special offering to listeners of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/. I'll put in the link in the podcast description for you. That's BetterHelp, HELEP. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast.
I also want to mention to you that I just launched my podcast swag on Wednesday of this week and have a page for it on my website. And I will also send you the link to it in the podcast description. And I will also send it to you in the newsletter that I usually send out on Fridays. I am now selling t-shirts, water bottles, and a backpack, and they all have the podcast logo and title on it and the tagline. So I'm looking forward to watching the sales and seeing who buys them, and spreading the word more about my podcast.
So I hope that episode was helpful to you and that you were able to get something out of it and it was meaningful for you, and that you can share that lesson with somebody else that you know who is neurodivergent or neurotypical and will be able to help you with that challenge that you feel like arises for you, or the lesson that you learned from the episode. And I hope that you take some time to journal about what thoughts or feelings came up for you while you were listening. And I hope that you can spread the word about NLD and being neurodivergent and try to spread the awareness with others as well. Thank you for listening to Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. Talk to you next Friday.